If you ask people what the best Die Hard game is, there's generally one response you'll get. Most people will say Die Hard Trilogy. Some might bring up the NES version from the early 90s, and some might even mention Die Hard Vendetta on GameCube. But most won't even stop to consider the Die Hard game that isn't really a Die Hard game. Sega's 1996 title, Die Hard Arcade. First developed as an original property, Die Hard Arcade was known as Dynamite Deka in Japan. For the Western market, Sega managed to secure the Die Hard license and set about tweaking the game to fit. This wasn't a massive job, as the game clearly took a lot of inspiration from Die Hard to begin with. Its entire plot basically riffing on the original movie, right down to locations. Main character Bruno, who was clearly modelled on McClane, would gradually become more dishevelled as the game progressed until he was down to some torn trousers and a vest. So the game was a clear fit for the licence, at least in most respects, but I'll talk about that later. In gameplay terms, Die Hard Arcade was one of the first brawlers to really make the jump to 3D. Sega's Titan video system, which also powered games such as Virtua Fighter and Treasure's legendary Radiant Silvergun, allowed Sega to make a fluid, engaging game that looked impressive for the time. It had all the usual tropes of its genre: waves of goons to pummel, weapons to pick up and use against them, and tough bosses that took a bit of strategy to beat. But it also added a couple of aspects itself. Hardware and engine limitations meant that making large, complex levels to walk through wasn't really possible, so fights took place in enclosed areas. Once an area was cleared, a short in-engine sequence would play, showing McClane making his way to the next area. These sequences would include QuickTime events, where players would quickly have to press a direction or button when prompted. This usually resulted in McClane punching or kicking an unaware enemy in a very over-the-top manner. Failing these sequences would mean having to stop and fight the enemy instead. But they were short, and they were a nice way to break up what would otherwise be room after room of non-stop fighting. In addition to flat out killing everyone he encounters, McClane can also put them under arrest. It's a little bit more risky, but it does allow you to take enemies out permanently much quicker than simply beating them up does. So far, so standard. So what about the game makes it feel like it's not a Die Hard game? Well, there's a couple of things really. First of all is the humour. Now, Die Hard has always had a sense of humour. It's never taken itself too seriously, and the humour that was there always had a sensible, grounded feel, mostly coming from McClane's dry wit. Die Hard Arcade is far more overt in its strangeness. One fight takes place in a bathroom against a man purely in a pair of pants. There are sumo wrestlers, firefighters, and at a couple of points robot sentries to fight. It's moments like these that really go against the licence, but they don't manage to ruin anything. You're more likely to be scratching your head in confusion than you are to be cursing the game. The boss fights as well are a strange mix of powerful goons and over-the-top characters. The game's main villain, Hongo, fights you in the president's office with walls that can inexplicably extend out to crush you before he fights you bare-chested on the building's roof. It's a combination of elements that serve to make the game feel a little bit ridiculous within the context of the licence. For the most part though, Die Hard Arcade is a solid, enjoyable brawler. The controls work well, and the combat feels slightly like Virtua Fighter at times. There's not really anything I can say that I didn't like about the game. But the only bad thing is that you can only attack to your left and right, something that would be considered an egregious oversight these days. But that makes sense when you consider it's exactly how 2D brawlers had worked. The difficulty is fairly well pitched as well, starting off simply enough before ramping up appropriately as the game progresses. It also looks decent enough for a game of its age, with only the awful voice acting being particularly standout, but it's a minor issue. Overall, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed Die Hard Arcade. The game still plays well today, and while at times it does go in some strange directions, it's never less than entertaining.
Yippe-Kai-Yay, motherfucker.
Thanks for watching this episode of Arcade Attacks. Remember to like and subscribe to see more of our videos, and to come and visit us at grcade.co.uk.